In the digital versus analog rig debate, there are two pro-analog opinions that I see circulated the absolute most. Number one, digital rigs don't give you the feeling of having a cabinet in the room alongside you. And number two, digital rigs are just too complicated and they encourage too much endless tweaking. Now, even though I'm very much a digital lover, I actually, to some degree, agree with both of those complaints. But about a month ago, I began experimenting with the Seymour Duncan Power Stage 170, and now I can confidently say that those two arguments can be put to rest for me personally. So first I'm going to explain why both of these arguments are sometimes true, and then I'm going to explain how the Power Stage 170 rectifies both complaints. And just so you know, I did ask Seymour Duncan to send me this pedal to try, but I have to return it after this video. I was not paid to say anything I'm saying today, and they have no say over my presentation. Argument 1. Digital rigs don't give you the feeling of having a cabinet in the room. This argument stems from one of the most common ways that we use modelers today. The default setting is essentially your guitar into a series of pedals, an amplifier sim, a cabinet sim, and then a microphone sim, and then to the output. Now from that output, we usually run through studio monitors, a PA system, or a FR speaker. And this is a really good sound. Here's an example of what it sounds like to me in the room. Now, although this is a great sound and a super useful setup for recording and for just ease of use, it is completely different than having a cabinet close to you in a room. And the reason for that is pretty simple. When we play into an amplifier and through a cabinet, we're getting the sound of a real speaker pushing air, among other things. And a guitar speaker is not the same thing as a FR speaker, a PA speaker, and so on. And yes, you can start to add special EQs to try to replicate the sound of a cabinet, but in my opinion, that starts to push us into argument number 2. Digital rigs are just too complicated and they encourage too much endless tweaking. Interestingly enough, I believe that this argument largely stems from everything that happens after the amplifier in a digital rig. Consider this. When we think about pedals in front of an amplifier, the idea of moving around pedals and trying different pedals in different orders, it's pretty simple for us to understand because that's how it's always been done in the guitar world. The same thing goes for changing amplifiers. We have an idea of the Marshall sound or the Fender sound, and switching between the two is easy for us to understand and to wrap our head around. But then we get to the cabinet section and we have mics and mic placement, and an overwhelming amount of tweakability opens up. See, in the real world, we would almost never try to use a Marshall through a Roland Jazz Chorus speaker. But in the digital modeling world, we can do that. What about a Vox through a Mesa 4x12? Yeah, we can do that also, and so on and so forth. The options are simply endless. And then on top of that, we mix in the hundreds of microphones we have, from ribbons to dynamic mics, and we can place them in front, behind the amp, and so on. And we can mix different cabinets with different mics, and we can layer them all together. And as you can see, we start to get to that endless tweaking cycle. And this level of tweaking is confusing, and it can be overkill for most of us, and that includes me. I personally solved this issue by having just one cabinet and one mic combo that I use for everything. So this is what happens when you start making YouTube videos. You're in the middle of searching for the perfect potato, and then all of a sudden you remember what people are going to say in the comment section, and you decide you need to address that comment. So someone in the comments is definitely going to point out the fact that changing your cabinet, changing your microphone, changing how you mic the cabinet, all of that is going to make a much bigger difference in your final sound than simply changing the order of your pedals or changing the amp. By the way, this is the potato that I chose. Yes, you are 100% correct. But remember that the point of this video was to simplify the whole digital process and to make it a bit more similar to what you experienced growing up. So I ask you this question. How many of you growing up had 100 cabinets and 1,000 microphones to use when you were amping something? My point exactly. Oh, and like the video, please. I'm not threatening you with this. It's not loaded. But that doesn't solve argument 1. Now, the Seymour Duncan Power Stage series of pedals are mostly promoted by touring guitarists, but I believe it's the solution for both issues, and it can apply to bedroom guitarists or weekend warriors. And yes, there are many different power amps you can pair your modeler with, but I'll explain in a second why I like the Power Stage series. So if we go back to our modeler, we still go into our pedals and amplifier, but then we get rid of everything after the amp and go right into the power stage and then into a real cabinet. I'm using a very inexpensive Harley Benton 612. This is the rig that I've been using for my latest YouTube videos and my latest Patreon lessons, and it's led to some really interesting insights to lead playing that I've been sharing there, link below. I'm sure many would say that this still doesn't directly replace the tube amp sound, and you're probably right. But to my ears and in my hands, this is so much closer to the real thing than most of the common digital setups. And when you compare the price of analog gear to digital modelers, even if you include the price of a real cab and a real power amp, it's still hard to justify the price difference and the diminishing returns you may get with the real thing. With this setup, you get the real amp in a room feel and all the volume knob and picking dynamics that you can get with your electric guitar. And even if these examples don't sound very different through headphones, they feel totally different in the room. Now, when it comes to tweaking, even if you use a physical amp, you probably adjust the volume and EQ section a tiny bit every day. That's just what life is. There's a baby sleeping in the room next door, you turn the volume down. If you're getting a weird rattling somewhere in your room, you turn the bass down, so on and so forth. And with the Power Stage 170, you can lean over to your cabinet and make those small adjustments without getting into the larger changes on the modeler. And this may seem like a very small detail, but if you've been playing guitar for a while and you're used to turning around, leaning over, and adjusting your amp, having that feature there on the Power Stage is really, really nice, and it solves the issue of having to go all the way across the room to your modeler or going on your computer to make very small changes. And in terms of volume, I'm barely at 1 in this room, so you can be sure that if you're going to play live, it's going to be plenty loud. In summary, I believe this is the best of both worlds. You get your real amp in a room feel, you get to try endless amps and pedals without having to buy more things, and you bypass all of the tweaking that comes with cabinets and microphone simulations. So if you have a modeler, get a Power Stage and give this a try. Or if you're still an analog guy, I'm sure you can find a friend who has a digital rig that's similar to this. See if it changes your mind. By the way, I'm Andre Flood, and I'll talk to you soon.